My name is Tabbin Almond. I am a Brit, as you can tell by my accent. I've been alcohol-free now for over 2,500 days, which is quite a nice milestone. I got into difficulty with alcohol. Really, I was struggling all of my adult life, really. No spectacular rock bottoms, nothing dreadful ever happened, but it just took up loads and loads of my head.
Yes.
All thinking about booze. And that thing of just where's the next drink coming from and when's that wine bottle coming up my end of the table kind of thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It takes so much of our mental space, doesn't it?
Totally, yeah. And grew up in a family where everybody drank. Just my mother really quite problematically, very problematically. And I resented her for that and then found I was doing exactly the same thing, which just added to the self-loathing, really. And went off to university, already a fairly accomplished social drinker, studied French, spent a year in cognac, which probably didn't help, although I loved it at the time, and then went into advertising in the 1980s, which was an incredibly boozy world. And I absolutely loved it. You had zero complaints. It's probably one of the things that subconsciously attracted me to a career in advertising. But over time, I realized that my drinking was different to other people's. I got to the stage where I tried lots of things. I read lots of books. I kidded myself for a bit that I was okay because I had managed easily not to drink during pregnancy. 2 children, and it wasn't even an issue. So I thought, oh, I can't drink alcohol. And I hear that so often from other people.
Yeah, we convince ourselves, don't we? You're putting this baby first. But what we need to learn to do is to put ourselves first. And then
100%. And yeah, I was definitely not putting myself first. I tried lots of things. I read a lot, but this was back in the sort of very early 2000s. There wasn't the volume of quick lit out there that there is now.
Did you find Claire Pooley's book? Because she was in advertising.
She was, but I think that came a little bit later.
Maybe.
Yeah, so this would have been around 2003. I then took myself off to AA and tried AA for a couple of years, and it never worked for me, which my sponsors would say was my fault because I wasn't working hard enough. I wasn't working it. I had a real problem with saying, hello, my name's Tabbin. I'm an
I know, me too. I couldn't do AA because of that. And I still believe to this day, it's not good to label ourselves.
I was a strategic planner in advertising. I had to be quite precise over definitions, and I'm defining myself as something that I can't even articulate exactly what it is. It's a perception, and this whole thing of it's a disease, but it's a disease that you can get better from by just sitting and talking. I just didn't quite get it. I love the name of your organization, Tribe Sober, because I didn't find my tribe in AA.
No, me neither. And that's why I started Tribe Sober, because I really tried AA, but I just couldn't do it. I found it so negative and depressing as well. Plus, I don't know if you found this, Tabbin, but a lot of the people at the meetings I went to here in South Africa, they were much further down the line than me. They were drinking whiskey in the morning and they'd lost everything. And I was just a professional woman downing a bottle of wine every night. I started thinking, I'm not that bad. They're alcoholics. I'm not an alcoholic. So it was really counterproductive. So I eventually managed it on my own because I've got a background in training and development. And I thought with my coaching skills and designing courses, I could start my own community. And that's why I started Tribe Sober, to give people an alternative to AA. That's the kind of group that I would have needed. I just needed to find people like me, people that had good jobs, nice families, and were sinking a bottle of wine a night. And once you find your people, then it gets so much easier.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think community and connection with other people who've got the same issues is really important. And I didn't find that in AA because I didn't have a criminal record. My body was not covered in tattoos. And that's not a judgmental thing. I just felt like they were looking at me saying, go back and when you come back, when you've got, go away and come back.
You lightweight, Let's not be unfair on AA because they've helped millions and millions.
Oh, for sure.
Didn't do it for us. It's not everybody's cup of tea.
Then I read Alan Carr's book,
Oh, yes.
And the easy way to control alcohol. I love the easy bit, and I love the idea of control.
So
And
clever with that title.
because it wasn't saying you got to give up, it was just saying you can regain control. Finally, the end game is you probably will stop altogether.
Yeah.
But I love the explanation and the understanding that this is about your subconscious, and if you can rewire your subconscious,
Yeah.
it'll make a big difference. And I then did the hypnotherapy at the Alan Carr Clinic,
Okay.
and was alcohol free for 7 years, and really didn't think about drinking. I thought, this is it. I've found the Holy Grail, and I can't understand why everybody with a problem doesn't do this.
Yeah. And then you got a curveball, didn't you? After
I got a big curveball. I've had several. I had the breakdown of my marriage, which left me with huge financial problems that were somewhat of a surprise, let's put it that way. And then my husband went off to Australia, and 3 months later, I had the strongest intuition that my mammogram results were wrong, and insisted on a second opinion, and it turned out I was completely right. And I had a 5.5 centimetre tumour, breast cancer. And through all of that, I still didn't drink or even think about drinking. And then it suddenly got really scary. When they did the initial surgery, they tested my lymph nodes. And I went back like 10 days later, and they said, we tested 7 lymph nodes. It's in all 7 and in a really high count. And I don't know if they said this, they probably didn't put it so boldly, but my takeaway was, we need to find out where this has spread to. I'm sure they didn't say it like that, but I was just terrified. I was with my daughter, who was then 21, and my brother. And when we got home, they opened a bottle of wine. And for the first time in over 7 years, I thought, I want some of that. I really do not want to be in my head.
I got exactly the same diagnosis, lymph nodes, breast cancer. I was a drinker back then, and it never occurred to me to stop drinking. These days, I think the link between breast cancer and alcohol is quite well known. But my breast cancer was in 2006, and I certainly didn't know there was any link. So I carried on drinking. But yeah, it's a scary time. I was thinking things like, I'm going to die anyway. So
Yeah.
a second bottle's.
It's interesting you say that the connection between breast cancer and alcohol is well known, or better known now, because I'm not sure it is.
Yeah, you're right, actually. It still needs to get out there because it's outrageous, really. The World Health Organization announced that alcohol was a #1 carcinogen in 1988. And that information has been buried, and it's absolutely scandalous. And so many women have died during that period. But I do feel it getting more in the public domain because, like, you are writing books, and there's so many sobriety groups, and young ones are a lot more sensible than we used to be.
But back in 2014, when I finished my treatment, I said to the oncologist, okay, I'm cancer free, thank you. What do I need to do to stay cancer free? And was told, eat healthily and take plenty of exercise. No mention of alcohol. And when I 3-4 years later found out that about I still having regular checkups, and I said, what the heck? I asked you outright, why did you not tell me? And they said, we don't like to shame or judge patients. And I said, any shaming and judging, that's on you. That's you making the judgment. I just want the facts, please.
Educated. Absolutely. I had the same experience, Tabbin. I asked my guy, because I was a drinker and I hadn't given up, and I said, is it okay to drink alcohol? And he said, absolutely, my dear. He said, there's nothing wrong with a glass of wine now and again, he said. But of course, to a drinker's mind, that means, okay, fine, I'm back to my bottle.
On the hour, every hour, that's fine.
So, oh yeah, these guys. But I think it's changing a little bit. Claire Pooley, who also went through this breast cancer thing, she had a checkup recently, and she told me that they now talk about it much more openly where she went anyway. I'm not sure which hospital it was.
Well, I would personally love to see it as a health warning on labels in the same way that we have on cigarettes now. because I think it's just not well enough understood. Yeah. If you say to anybody what health risks are attached to alcohol, they'll
Liver. It's always liver, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's probably all that anybody knows. And the connection between alcohol and mental health
Huge.
is huge. So I spent 3 years after I was recovered from the cancer with no information about alcohol being a contributing factor. The drinking got out of hand again in a very quiet, private way, drinking on my own. And one day I Googled something like, am I an alcoholic? And of course, anybody that does that, you know the answer, and came across this Naked Mind. It's a very slick American marketing operation. Once you clicked on something, that's it, you're going to get links forever. And particularly hungover one day, I booked myself onto a 3-month course.
Mhm.
I'd read the book and it made a lot of sense, but I wasn't spontaneously sober as a result of reading the book. But I started the course, and this was back in 2018, and Annie was the only coach, her and a guy called Scott Pinyard. And so Annie Grace was my coach, which was pretty awesome. And I was alcohol-free pretty quickly into that course. And the pivotal night for me, where everything just, enough's enough, was the night before doing the moonwalk, which is 26.2 miles. It's marathon distance walk in London overnight in aid of breast cancer research or breast cancer charities. And the night before it, I was with my daughter in a restaurant having a meal. We had both had some wine, and I was halfway through my glass and I just thought, you just learned that this stuff that's in your glass causes breast cancer. You've rallied a group of 8 people to go and raise money for this charity, and you're putting yourself in danger of needing that charity again. That's just nuts. Knowing what you know, now's the time. I just handed my daughter the wine and said, do you want to finish this? And her reaction was, isn't it very nice? Because she couldn't believe that I was not wanting my glass of wine. I said, just with it. And she went, what, forever? And I said, yeah, maybe, but certainly not for now. And I don't think I've ever said never again. I've just stopped wanting it.
Yeah. I think it's easier that way. We say at Tribe Sober, avoid the F word, the forever word. Just keep on racking up that alcohol-free time. And I think eventually we feel so many benefits that we think, I don't want to let these benefits go.
Exactly. Yes. And life becomes so much better, and you feel better in every way, and you're enjoying life so much more. It's a trade-off I'm not prepared to make.
So talk to us about your book.
My book is called Bottling Up Trouble: How Alcohol is Harming Your Business and What to Do About It. And it came about from my sort of coaching sweet spot, if you like, is people who are quite senior in their work. And in industries where client entertaining is important and client relationships are important. And of course, alcohol plays a big part in that. In industries like insurance and the law and the media, anything where you build relationships with people. I wanted to explore just what is it costing businesses in hard cash terms, but also human costs and it's rather harder to pin down costs. And then how do we change that culture? So that's really what the book is about.
Wow, interesting. Have you come across Janet Hadley in the UK?
Yeah.
She does similar work, doesn't she?
Very similar, yes, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's amazing because I was an HR director and a big drinker, of course. And I must say that if someone like yourself or Janet had come along and said, oh, let's run a wellness program and touch on alcohol, I would have thought, no. But I think these days organizations are much more open because they're beginning to realize about the impact. So throw some statistics at us. How much is it costing?
It's scarily hard to find hard data. I looked at every piece of research I could find, but I also commissioned Ipsos to do some research for me and found that 94% of people do not tell the truth if they're off sick due to alcohol. Which is not surprising, but it does mean that there is no data on alcohol-related absenteeism. We know what the absentee rate is, but what we don't know is what proportion of that is down to alcohol.
There's usually a lot on Mondays.
Mondays and Fridays, yeah. And of course, with this increased working from home, people are able to, inverted commas, work, but they're actually really quite badly hungover. There was a really good study done by the Institute of Alcohol Studies, which was conducted pre-pandemic, and they found that nearly half of people said they'd been to work hungover, and 9% said they'd done so in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
But a substantial proportion of them, it was a really regular occurrence. It was happening not just once a month, probably even once a week. But the figure that really hit me was that when they were asked, okay, what effect does that have on your productivity? They themselves reported that they were 39% less productive when they were hungover. And they're likely to underreport rather than overreport. So the figure is probably higher. They're probably 50% less productive or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's another figure that we can't work out, but the sort of ripple effect on their colleagues. The fact that people make bad decisions when they're hungover, people need to check their work, they are insensitive to other people and cause upsets and that sort of stuff. Other people are having to pick up the slack, and so it causes resentment. So the real figure will be substantial there. And what we cannot say definitively is how many people on any one day may be going into work or going out drinking during the working day. Now, in plenty of jobs, that's not on, but in advertising insurance, there are plenty of
the client out to lunch, don't you? So how do you deal with that situation? Because a lot of people ask me that. They say, my job involves taking out clients and they all expect me to buy them very nice wine or champagne. What can I do? What's your answer to that?
In the immediate, we need to change the culture. Because if somebody's client is saying, come on, let's go and get drunk at lunchtime today, the onus is on the employer not to put that person in that situation. We need to get to a situation where clients are not expecting alcohol. There are one or two organisations which have communicated with their clients that their staff are not allowed to drink alcohol during the working day. There are some clients who also have that policy, and that's great. So that you arrange a meeting with a client, but you do something that may be a bit different.
Yeah.
My daughter is in the advertising industry as well, and she has a client who she meets early in the morning. They do a gym class together and then go and have breakfast.
Fabulous.
Which is brilliant.
Business breakfasts need to come in.
Yeah.
Here in Cape Town, I used to like these long boozy lunches with my girlfriends, but now quite a few of them don't drink anymore. We can afford to go to the best hotel in Cape Town and have a beautiful breakfast in fabulous surroundings and sit there getting our buzz from coffee. And it's just as much fun. So it's about making those tweaks, isn't it? But of course, business, they're worried that they're going to lose a client or lose the money.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that we've got Gen Z who are drinking much less than we
like
did.
Your daughter, hopefully.
Like my daughter, yeah, she drinks next to nothing. As those people ascend the ranks within an organisation, they will be responsible for changing the culture. And we're already seeing that start to happen. The pandemic helped a bit in that those really big, really over-the-top Christmas parties, etc., they didn't happen for a couple of years, or they were very different. As younger people have been responsible for organising them, people are a bit more confident to say, what about the non-drinkers? Or, actually, last time I went to one of those, everybody got really drunk. Can we make people pay for their alcohol? So those sort of policies are really good. Giving free alcohol to people who aren't used to drinking an awful lot is a really stupid idea.
See, and organisations also need to understand that they may well be liable if somebody crashes their car and kills people on the way home, which has been known.
Yeah,
to mention the kind of sexual harassment angle as well. As an HR person, I've had to deal with the aftermath sometimes of these events, and it can be tragic for the company and obviously for the person involved. I have the impression that things are changing because I've been out of corporate for 20 years, but so I don't really know from experience. But in my podcasting career, I've interviewed quite a few people that are going into organizations and they're doing yoga and wellness. And a guy recently I interviewed, he used to be a big drinker, now he doesn't. And he goes into organizations and talks about forest bathing and things like that because he's a big nature freak now. And I think that's great because when I was an HR director, if someone like him had come in and talked about forest bathing, I'd say, I don't think so. Organizations are open now to that kind of.
Yeah. And I think it's starting, but I think that the big thing is we do not need booze to bond with each other. And laying down that this is how you guys are going to generate team spirit is just ridiculous. Let people come up with the things that they want to do themselves. And there is a growth in places like bowling alleys and that sort of thing, activities. It's not to say that you demonize alcohol and say nobody can drink on a work social, but work socials should be primarily getting to know people, not getting drunk with them.
Because that's been the focus, hasn't it, in the past?
It has, yeah.
Because I worked in several corporates and every single corporate had this culture. It was work hard, play hard. Long hours, and then the company credit card was behind the bar and we relaxed. We played, and the next day we'd go in feeling fragile and everybody almost wore their hangover as a badge of honor.
Yeah. And I think that there are plenty of organizations still where people are made a hero for their drunken antics. That just needs to change. It's thoroughly inappropriate. There is a sort of DE&I aspect to it as well, in that it's not just young women who may be wanting to get pregnant or in the early stages of pregnancy who will go to social things and not want to drink, but there are plenty of people in a multicultural society who do not want to drink ever. It's against their religion and their beliefs and their code of ethics, but they also don't want to be around people who are drunk.
And neither do they want to feel left out.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's bad business to leave them out. A bonding session that has some people feeling really uncomfortable and leaving the minute they can and wishing they worked somewhere else is not good for you as an employer brand.
So apart from writing your book, Tabbin, do you go and consult with organizations? Are you working?
Yeah. So what I did, as the book is called Bottling Up Trouble, and I created something called the Bottling Up Trouble assessment tool, which is just a very simple online quiz, basically, questionnaire, multiple choice. It doesn't take very long to do. It pinpoints various areas where alcohol can have an influence in work life. So, for example, what's your policy on alcohol and expenses? Somebody who's got a problem with alcohol will say, great, I'm allowed 20 quid. I can get 3 bottles of really cheap wine then. The assessment tool gives somebody a risk score and
it's health and safety, isn't it?
Absolutely. And a commentary on these are the areas that you can maybe look at. Yeah. And then I would follow up with them. So I will do just education talks so that people understand the risks around alcohol, physical and mental health risks.
To the employees or?
To the employees, yes, yeah. So that's a well-being blind spot angle, if you like.
Oh, totally, yeah. I was like that. I was always doing yoga and eating organic, but the wine.
Yeah. And then I also work with organizations to look at how they can change the culture. What are the steps they can take to build a less alcohol-centric culture? And the main issue there is one of leadership. So if you imagine that I'd come to see you when you were an HR director.
Oh, I would have taken you out for a boozy lunch.
But you probably would have felt really hypocritical in raising the need to change the culture.
Yeah.
And because of the stigma, which is completely wrong, and I'd love it to be just wiped out, but there is stigma and shame around having a problem with alcohol.
Especially for women.
Yes, I believe that's right. Yeah. And that means that it's very rare to find a business leader who will say, I had a problem with alcohol myself, and I am here to ensure that anybody else in this organization who is struggling is helped rather than vilified, shamed, and fired, which tends to be what happens. And particularly here in the UK, because having a problem with alcohol is not a protected disability. So if you've got stress or anxiety or cancer or a broken leg or any other health problem, you can't be fired for that. But you can be fired for having a problem with alcohol. And we are very much at odds here in the UK with the rest of the sort of civilized world, if you like. And I don't think people necessarily know that, but I think people do know that they feel psychologically extremely unsafe going to their boss and saying, I've got a bit of a problem. It's okay to go off with stress. It's not okay to go off with alcohol-related stress, even though we know that an awful lot of stress is alcohol-related. But because nobody can say what's really going on, they're not getting appropriate help.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to have a kind of employee assistance program that was anonymous. People could go on that, but yeah, it's very tricky, isn't it? And I think it's so powerful if you can have a senior person saying, I had a problem, I've solved it, my life is so much better now, just to give it as a general talk. And that will really help to smash the shame.
Yeah. So I do some work with advertising agencies, unsurprisingly, because obviously I know a lot of people in them, and just saying, look, this is my story. I am not unusual, and I am not ashamed of having got into difficulty, but these are the risks and the things to watch out for. And just making people more aware, especially if they're younger and their zeitgeist is changing for sure, I believe. But there's one thing to have a young woman of 23, 24 saying, yeah, I don't drink. Completely different if you've got a mum in her early 40s with a marriage falling apart and 2 children and all the stresses and strains. Those are the people we need to really worry about, because they've already got the drinking habit.
Yes.
And they are used to the idea of alcohol as a way of coping. It's a self-medication, a sort of coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And those people are the ones who are getting into difficulty and literally don't have anywhere to turn.
Yeah.
They're like you and I were, they haven't hit rock bottom, nothing awful has happened, they haven't lost their job. But if they don't get the help they need, they're going to struggle on their own, on willpower alone, maybe trying AA, just with all that self-loathing.
Yeah.
And they will not be good, productive employees. They'll be the people who are showing up and being 39% less productive because they're hungover.
Yeah.
And they'll be going off sick with stress. And for very little investment, you can help those people and they will then become ambassadors for you.
Exactly. It's just about getting the information out there, isn't it? A lot of women, as you say, in their 40s or 50s are really struggling because their life's getting a bit tough, that midlife working mom thing. So the drinking has moved from having fun with your friends to sitting alone, downing a bottle of wine because you're so stressed after the day and how are you going to keep the show on the road. And those are the kind of women that we work with. I was in my 50s until I realized and accepted that I had a problem. And it was only when I tried to drink a bit less and I couldn't that I thought, oh dear, I think there's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think some of those people will be able to stop just through acquiring the knowledge and the science and thinking, okay, this really isn't good for me. But plenty of them will need more support.
Yeah, and need to do the work on those limiting beliefs.
Willpower doesn't work, no. And so helping people to understand why they like to drink, I think, is really important, and reframing those beliefs. That's where employers can help. Just a small investment in helping somebody find appropriate support
Yeah.
is going to be such a worthwhile investment for anybody.
So talk to us about coaching, Tabbin. When and why did you decide to train as a coach?
I did the This Naked Mind course in 2018, in the spring, early summer of 2018, and then went to Denver that autumn to the very first This Naked Mind conference, which was really cool, really good, and met lots of the people who I'd been on the course with, and I'm still in touch with a lot of those people. And at that stage, Annie was saying that she wanted to train some coaches. And she actually mentioned it to me because I'd obviously got to know her quite well. And I went, nah, not for me. And I think I said something really crass like, I don't want to make money out of other people's misfortune, which she's been kind enough to forget. So there was a group of coaches trained, and then they repeated it the following year. And This Naked Mind, Annie or Scott, got in touch and said, we're doing it again. What about it? And I thought, actually, yeah, I realized that lots of people make money out of other people's misfortune. That's what doctors do, and vets, and nurses, and loads of people. You're not exploiting anybody, you're helping them. And I think also I was, by that stage, more confident in my alcohol-free status. It had been only 6 months probably at that stage, the first time round. So I did the training in 2020, and we literally just started. It was so, in sort of late February, and then in March we went into lockdown. So I suddenly had 2 hours extra a day, which was great. I didn't have to commute. So I did all the training during 2020, qualified at the end of that year. And my intention was only ever to coach part-time. I thought I'd do it evenings and weekends. And then I just loved it and found it really rewarding. And I think once you find something that you absolutely love doing, your previous job doesn't look so exciting anymore.
But if in advertising you had liquor account.
Yeah, I had actually always refused to work on booze. I even had it written into my contract, and that wasn't out of anything other than a firm belief that good advertising will make people want things they don't need. And with the problems with alcohol in my family, and particularly with my mum, I thought, I don't want to be a part of that. I was really lucky. I worked at a very good agency where we were allowed to do that. We didn't handle tobacco back in the day, which was a very lucrative sector. Every agency wanted a fag account. And we didn't handle breakfast cereals that made mothers buy them because it had a little plastic figure inside. It came from the leader, a guy called David Abbott. It was then the #1 agency in the country for good reason. So I was very lucky to have that. And because I was given the option there, I thought, actually, as and when I move, I'm just going to say, by the way, I don't work on booze. Yeah. Cigarette advertising had been banned by that stage. Yeah.
Yes, thank goodness. I wish that alcohol advertising would be banned, of course, because that would make a huge difference, wouldn't it?
It would, yes. If you look at what this sort of rapid decrease in smoking rates after the ban, yeah. But alcohol is so ingrained in society that, yes, the rates of drinking would go down, but the rates of harm will continue to rise for quite a while because, and I think it's just they can't make the economics work, which at some point I hope it will happen because, it's such a cliche thing to say, isn't it? But if alcohol was invented now, it would never be legalized anywhere.
Pass any of the tests that every bit of food and drink has to go to.
Yeah, but it's here and there is a whole industry around it and it's quite hard to uninvent it. So I think it's going to come about through people just choosing better alternatives. Yeah.
Well, I gave up drinking 10 years ago and there was nothing, which made me even more grumpy when I was out because I had to have water or Coke or something. But it's brilliant how many there are. And it's interesting, isn't it, how a lot of the liquor companies are now doing alcohol-free alternatives. It's like they can see that there is a shift and there is a societal shift. So the more of those that we get, the better, I think. And the alcohol-free beer is brilliant. I never used to drink beer, but these days I drink alcohol-free beer because the wine's still pretty rubbish.
Yeah, although there are some good wines, the sparkling wines. I've met a few people in that world and learned that there's a difference between a non-alcoholic wine and a de-alcoholized wine. And some of the de-alcoholized wines are really good. They're different. You're not getting the same experience as if you drink a lot of people's drinking is just about ritual and habit and fitting in and stuff. And somebody actually said to me the other day, "Oh, Tabbin, I hear you were in the pub drinking red wine the other night." And I said, "Yeah, I was." They said, "But I thought you didn't drink." And I said, "It was de-alcoholized red wine." They went, "Oh." And I said, "It's really nice, actually. I've got some at home. Come around and taste it if you like."
Yeah,
So,
we say to people, you can keep the ritual, but change the ingredients. It's as simple as that.
ultimately, it's about the chemical formula of the liquid in the glass, isn't it? And that's all we're talking about. Your social life doesn't stop. In fact, it's enhanced.
Yes, and you remember it the next day.
Exactly. Yeah. And you get up and go to the gym in the morning if you want to, or whatever you want to do in the morning. Yeah.
Not to like. Are you doing this work full time now?
I am now, yes. I resigned from advertising in the back end of 2021 and have been coaching full time since January 22. Yeah. So, yeah, quite a while now. Yeah. I coach quite a lot for This Naked Mind at the moment, and I've got a raft of private clients, and I'm doing more and more work with companies, which is really rewarding because that's a one-to-many, and it's the preventative piece as well, which I really believe in. Yeah.
So how can people contact you and buy your book?
My coaching business is called Wine to Water Coaching. So it's taken the
to Jesus.
Yeah, because for me that was the real miracle, turning wine to water. Yeah, so it's Wine to Water Coaching, and the book is called Bottling Up Trouble, which is available on Amazon. And for anybody who wants to take the Bottling Up Trouble assessment, you can just literally put bottlinguptrouble.com in, and you would be taken straight to that assessment tool.
Oh, great. I was going to ask you how we could get hold of that, because I think a lot of people would be interested in doing that in their organisation.
It's structured in such a way it's not just for leaders, it's for anybody, because the idea is that it gives an employee the ammunition to go to their bosses and say, "I've been worrying about this for a little while. I think we might have, room for improvement. Can we talk about it?" So it's designed to be something that people can use. There's a bit of a catalyst for a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. It helps the dialogue to get started.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And it costs nothing, no obligation. It's just to get a sense check on what's going on in your organisation. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, I'll make sure that's in the show notes. Anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to mention?
No, I think we've covered everything really. Yes. My two things are, let's change the culture in the workplace, look after people who are in trouble and not fire them, and make sure that people really understand the health risks, physical and mental, which is not the case at the moment, sadly.